Okay, well, I'm speaking now with JulieBindel, who is a freelance journalist from London. Good morning or good evening, Julie, depending on where you are in the world.
Good morning to me. Good evening to you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so Julie, you were nominated for a Stonewall Award for journalism last year. You drew some criticism then, and you've just written an article in this month's issue of Standpoint, and you seem to have polarised the community once again. It seems to me that some people, at least, have painted you as being transphobic. One of your main arguments is that transsexuality or the gender reassignment surgery does nothing to advance the women's movement or feminism, and also that having the operation does not make you a man or a woman; it just makes you a man without a dick.
Well, I think that having this notion that we have a female and male brain is ridiculous and one that feminists have been resisting for a long time. I mean, to put it crudely, many will say that they feel trapped in the wrong body.
Yeah.
Well, how can that be if all beings are born equal and if we are, in fact, socialised into our gender roles? And what feminists have been saying for a long, long time is that gender roles benefits men because the roles that are actually ascribed to us, that we're then taught and expected to carry out, to perform, are those of masculinity and femininity. So men are strong, men are powerful, men are confident, women are weak, feminine and fluffy. And when, you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, more often than not, the psychiatrist will base it on whether or not you've been a proper girl or a proper boy. And I don't want to be a proper girl. Feminism's all about saying, actually, as far as I'm concerned, I want to be a proper person. I don't want to actually be trained into playing with Barbie dolls and wearing pink and being fluffy and crossing my ankles. And that's how many of the people who have the surgery will be trained.
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, there would be no need for gender whatsoever. But if, as you say, the gender binary always favours males, then why would anybody in their right mind who was a biological male want to present as a female?
Quite frankly, I don't think it would be as cynical as that, the choice that's made. I think that there are lots of young men who are very uncomfortable in their bodies, and the last thing that they wish to be socialised into is the kind of masculine person to whom they cannot live up to. Now, obviously, this is something different and deeper than merely a feeling that I think we all probably had growing up as lesbian or gay.
Yeah.
The kind of self-hatred and the shame, etc. It is something more profound that people who present as gender dysphoric feel. But I think we've just completely let them down, and we've decided that surgery is a solution to a psychological problem. Now, of course, some transsexuals will say, yes, it's the best thing that could ever happen to me, and I'm totally happy. I'd love to see a longitudinal study on a large sample of people over a period of 5 years or more to see if their lives are as happy as they expected them to be. Because I know that for some people who've said that they regret the surgery, but they daren't speak out because they move within a transsexual community and they feel that they would be maligned if they were public about how far they regret it, because we know that it's a community that's actually steeped in anger a lot of the time, and that anger is very often interpreted into the most vile misogynistic ranting.
But if, as you contend, that many post-op transsexuals regret going through with the surgery, then would that make the psychiatrist who originally wrote the referral to be incompetent?
You see, what a lot of people don't know is that one of our psychiatrists, Dr. Russell Reed, had very serious complaints against him by 18 of his former patients, who then joined in a class action and took him to a medical tribunal where he was admonished for his practice and behaviour over the years. For example, diagnosing people as gender dysphoric after 45 minutes, literally asking about them whether they played with dolls or whether they played with action men and trucks when they were children.
I was under the impression that it took about 2 years to make a correct diagnosis.
For me, it's not even about taking time to make the diagnosis. I think the diagnosis is nonsense.
So
I think
then
the diagnosis that there is something essential in your brain which programs you to either play with trucks and rough and tumble or play with dolls and prefer pink is absolute nonsense. If that were the case, it defies every single experience of those of us who grow up not wanting to behave like conventional females. And I'm not transsexual, but had I gone to a psychiatrist when I was 11 or 12 and being bullied at school and being terribly confused about my sexuality, I possibly would have been diagnosed as such. And I may be sitting here now talking to you as a man.
Would you say that gender dysphoria simply does not exist?
I think that the diagnosis is one that's been constructed by male psychiatrists in the 1950s. For me, the issue is that we now have this diagnosis which suggests that we have a male brain and a female brain, and that the correct way to behave is one way for women and one way for men, and that has set the women's movement back considerably, because what we've been doing is saying there is no such thing as gender. It's all a social construction for the benefit of patriarchy, if you like, and we should be able to live as we wish in our bodies, behave and dress as we like, and identify as we like. We do not need surgery and a new birth certificate and a whole new set of lessons as to how to behave like Doris Day to be seen as a proper woman, because that is the absolute antithesis of feminism and what we've been trying to do over the decades.
It may be the antithesis of what you've been pushing for, but you would allow that there are some individuals who really, really desperately want this. And in fact, some woman in an article which you quoted, Christine Burns of Press for Change, points out that a fifth of people who don't get treatment actually end up committing suicide.
Yes, of course. Christine is absolutely right. What should be happening is we should be looking at this as a serious issue that needs attention. How do we know that these people committed suicide because they didn't get sex change surgery? How do we know it's not that they didn't recover, they didn't feel satisfied with their treatment? Because, in fact, they were ignored and they were ridiculed and they were maligned, and because psychiatrists aren't trained in anything other than spotting gender dysphoric conditions. We've got no idea about that. And what I also didn't have room to say is looking at the number of people who will talk about their change of mind, their change of view about this as they get older. I mean, I did say in the piece that for 2/3 of children who are diagnosed as gender dysphoric, they grow up to be lesbian or gay and have no further desire for sex change surgery.
Yes, well, it seems that it would be advisable for these people or for the children, to have to wait until their mind matures. But on the other hand, as you know, if someone really truly is committed to a transition, then it's best to start them on hormones as early as possible.
I see that as child abuse. The effects of these hormones are not known. They're irreversible, the effects. You're talking about a child who has got no idea what he or she will feel like when he gets older. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that that's what we're doing, rather than allowing children to express themselves in whichever way they wish.
Yeah, well, as I said, in a perfect world, there would be no need for gender identity whatsoever.
Well, we'll never have that perfect world so long as people who present as different to their gender normative requirements as being sliced up and made into a normal, fluffy, frilly woman or a tattooed, hairy man. There'll never be any perfect world, because we'll always just see gender as totally polarised.
Well, what do you think of Nepal now? It actually has a third sex, which is recognised on official documents.
Well, I think, quite frankly, all that's doing is imposing yet another gender and no doubt yet another set of rules of how to behave. I think that we're barking up the wrong tree. It's not about the right for any transsexual person to go along, present as gender dysphoric, have the surgery, and define themselves as a woman. I think for me, it's about the fact that we have never questioned this diagnosis. We've never questioned this growing phenomenon. And when we do, we're maligned as though we are akin to Hitler and the worst fascist in the world. And this silencing and this bullying tells its own story about what a sacred cow it's become.
Well, I'd love to continue this conversation, but unfortunately this show only goes for half an hour, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap it up. But I would like to thank you for contributing, and I'm sure there will be much more debate about this issue in the years to come. But in the meantime, I have been speaking with Julie Bindel from the UK. Thanks a lot, Julie.
Thank you very much.